What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. As you can see here, we have a Surron. Now this is a new thing to our channel. Actually, this is our buddy Sheldon's bike that's been featured a few times. We have done some upgrades to it. So this video is all about Torp. We have a Torp TC1000 controller installed and a Torp TM25 Surron motor installed in this build. So this series is going to be two videos. The video right now, we have it all installed. We're going to be talking about it, riding it, testing it, getting a good feel for it. But then our second video is one we already filmed about how to install it, how easy the setup is, getting it all set up with the display, and that is going to come out in like 4 days after this video. So stay tuned if you want to know all of that really in-depth guide. Stay tuned for that. But right now, let's talk about why our buddy Sheldon upgraded from the current controller setup he had to this one. As you guys can see, Sheldon's bike has a ton of upgrades on it, and it did already have an upgraded aftermarket controller. That was a E-Moto Bros BAC 4000. So that's what he's been running for a long time, along with a stock Surron motor and this EBMX 60 volt 53 amp hour battery. So this is still a 60 volt battery, but it does have a lot higher power capabilities than the stock battery. So with this setup, he wanted to change some things because he just wasn't loving his BAC 4000. That controller's really outdated. There really isn't much customization as far as using an app on the display. You can do different power modes, but above that, there's really not much you can do. So he just didn't feel like his bike was running the way he wanted it to feel. So we went to Darwin EV. We said, hey, what can we do to make his bike run proper? So we got set up with the Torp TC1000 controller, Torp TM25 motor. It's kind of hard to see because his Luna skid plate covers it, but this is a powerhouse of a motor. And if you watch our install video, you'll see how much beefier, heavier, and just better feeling this motor really is. And then later in the video, we're going to talk about why we went with the TC1000 controller versus the TC500, which is essentially rated for less power. But we'll go in depth on that later in the video. All right, you guys, let's talk about this motor controller kind of battery combination. Now, a lot of you will notice, because we just mentioned that this is still a 60 volt battery, and you don't hear that a lot when people do, you know, high power Surron or Talaria builds. Most people don't do a 60 volt upgraded battery. Now, Sheldon was kind of starting and just didn't necessarily think he was going to go super big power on this bike, but as life continues, that's kind of what ends up happening a lot of the time. So he was running 12 kilowatts on his BAC 4000 controller and stock motor. That was working all right for him. He kind of was having some glitches and some hiccups that just didn't give him a ton of confidence when he was riding off-road trails and steep stuff. He kind of would have the controller cut out, or his motor hall sensor was acting up. We don't know exactly what was wrong, but something just wasn't acting great a lot of the time. And so we went to Adam at Darwin EV, said, you know, what's going to be the best combination for Sheldon? And, you know, we talked through it with him. We kind of compared the TC500 controller, compared the TC1000 controller, which is the one we have here, and decided to also just pair it with that Torp TM25 motor that is a direct plug and play for the Surron and plug and play for the TC1000 controller. Now, this motor is a powerhouse and delivers a lot more torque, phase amps, and a similar top speed to stock. Ideally, we just wanted to give Sheldon a setup that was going to be easy to install, plug and play, and have full customizability with the app, and yet still keep things simple. And I think that's something that Torp does a really good job doing, is, you know, making it so you can have a lot of advanced settings that you can change, but also keep it very simple and easy so that anybody can understand what you're changing, what you're trying to adjust, and actually get your bike to feel the way you want it to feel. So this Torp, very impressed with the install process. If you guys watch our second video coming out in a couple days, I think you're going to be super impressed too. We've installed a lot of controllers at this point, and so, you know, we kind of understand how it all works, and none of them end up being super difficult for us. But this Torp, man, it was so easy and slick. So if you guys are looking for a Surron controller or motor or battery, you need to hit up our guys at Darwin EV. Adam is super reliable and just is a vault of knowledge when it comes to these products. We do have a discount code in the description. So, and then you guys can learn how to install it, get it all set up and everything working perfectly on your bike in our next video to come. So far, this controller motor combo feels excellent. And like, it just feels light and nimble and playful as far as the throttle feels. It kind of sounds like I'm talking about the bike, and I am, because this bike is obviously just a super sick build. It's got tons of power, big wheels. You know, it's a bike that I just love riding. But honestly, this controller motor is a huge difference from what I had before. I felt like I just didn't have the right throttle control and stuff that I did previously. Really quick, let's talk about the power we are currently running with this setup, and then we're going to stop and talk about the differences between the TC500 controller and the TC1000 controller and which is right for you. So currently we are running about 17 kilowatts in our sport mode and 550 phase amps. Now phase amps is basically your torque. We're also running 150 amps field weakening, which is the max that Torp lets you run in this setup. And we could run a little bit higher power with this battery. The battery is rated up to 19 kilowatts, but we set it up that high and we would trip the BMS if we did full throttle pulls for too long. So we decided just to lower it a little bit, and now it's running great at 17 kilowatts, which is still a 5 kilowatt increase from what he had before. Now we have a capability of running up to 700 phase amps on this Torp TM25 motor, but we actually have it turned down because we just don't need any more torque. The torque that this motor provides is a lot. So we have it turned down because we still have a little bit larger sprocket. Sheldon previously had a 60 tooth sprocket because the BAC 4000 controller doesn't allow you to run a ton of torque, or phase amps, I mean, sorry. It still is torque, but it's technically called phase amps. So he was running a 60 tooth sprocket, which is massive. We geared him down to a 52 tooth, which feels a lot better on this motor, and if he wanted to just run a smaller sprocket too, he could get a little bit more top speed and then just run a little bit more phase amps to get a little more torque if he felt like he needed it. So let's stop and talk about the difference between some of the Torp products and controllers, because I just want you guys to understand kind of the differences and what's right for you to make sure that your upgrade path in the future is a good one. Okay, let's talk about this controller and the difference between the lower powered TC500 controller and this higher powered TC1000 controller, and we'll talk about in a minute why we picked the TC1000. So the TC500 is basically for the person who is running a stock motor. So that controller is capable of the maximum power of 18 kilowatts on 72 volt and about 14 kilowatts on 60 volt. It's also limited to 500 phase amps, which is basically your torque and basically how much front end lift you get depending on your setup. Now the TC1000 is more for the person who wants to run an aftermarket upgraded motor and run higher than 18 kilowatts and be able to run more phase amps than 500. This controller is technically limited to well over 30 kilowatts and 1,000 phase amps, so it has much higher capabilities than the TC500. But the reason we went with the TC1000, even though we have this 60 volt battery, is actually kind of because we have a 60 volt battery and for what's to come in the future. So the TC500 can only run 14 kilowatts on a 60 volt. This we can run 19 kilowatts on our 60 volt because the controller has those higher limitations and allows us to pull a lot more power from this battery. And then Sheldon also in the future will probably go to a larger capacity, more powerful 72 volt. And then with this combo controller and motor, he'll be able to run upwards of 26 kilowatts. So that's what this motor is limited to. So technically right now we're limited by our battery. If that gets upgraded, we can go higher power. Then our limiting factor is our motor at 26.5 kilowatts. That's what the Torp app lets you turn this motor up to if we had a better battery. After that, our controller has a lot higher power numbers. Let's go back to our motor for just a second. So this is the Torp TM25 motor. This is a fairly low kV motor that has a ton of torque, which is those phase amps. But the one thing we noticed with the Torp controllers is they only allow you to turn this motor up to 700 phase amps. That's when you select the motor, that's the limit on the slider that it gives you. But we know that if you put this motor on some other controllers, you can get 800-900 phase amps, maybe even 1,000 on the EBMX X9000 V2 controller. But Torp is limiting us a little bit harder than some of the other controllers because that's what they think it's limited to. But we've seen people run quite a bit higher. So that's one thing where this controller is technically rated to 1,000 phase amps, but they don't let the motor get turned up that high. Even though Torp limits you to 700 phase amps on this motor, we're not really too worried about it because like I talked about earlier, we had to downsize our sprocket a ton and our phase amps we only have set at 550 because this motor just has gobs of torque. It really turns those phase amps into a lot of torque, where other motors, sometimes you have to run a lot more phase amps to get the same amount of torque. So this is performing great under the current scenario and circumstances. Sheldon will probably go to a 72 volt in the future. Darwin EV sells some amazing custom built 72 volt batteries. You'll have to check them out on his website. We'll have a link in the description. Again, if you guys are interested in this controller or in this motor or in the TC500 controller, that lower power one, if you don't want to push extreme numbers, that's going to be a great controller for you. We'll have discount codes for all three in the video description. So Alex is on the E-Ride Pro SS and Rita's on the 79 bike Falcon M. Both of those bikes have upgraded tires and handlebars and pegs, and that's basically it. And they are awesome in that way. Okay guys, we are riding again, and I just want to talk about how this controller actually feels, you know, paired with this motor on a Surron. So far I'm super impressed. I think that the throttle has a ton of customizability, and it's just a blast to get out and ride. It's also fast. This bike is definitely fast. If you guys are more interested in like the install of both of these and kind of getting more in depth on a bunch of technical specs and kind of what's possible in this Torp app, then please watch our second video. It's going to come out, I believe this is going to drop on a Sunday, and our second video will drop the following Wednesday or Thursday. So 3 or 4 days later, and we're going to show you how to install it, how to get it set up. Now really quick, if you guys haven't seen another YouTube video by a guy named Jack Cecil, he has actually taken this motor and controller combo on a Surron to 100 miles an hour. He reached 102 miles an hour. He had a very well set up bike, prepped, and was running one of those Darwin EV 72 volt batteries that I mentioned earlier. He has some really nice high powered batteries, and Jack was able to get over 100 miles an hour. So this combination and setup really does have some huge potential. Obviously we're not pushing those limits today with the 60 volt battery and, you know, just running kind of basic trails here. It is still the middle of winter in Utah, and so this is really all we have access to is just these, you know, little lower elevation trails. But we'll get back out into, you know, our high mountain technical riding in the future. But guys, this TC1000 is awesome. We're loving the throttle customization, and it is fun to ride. Now I will just say really quick that this bike and controller combo could really do with a throttle upgrade. Sheldon is still running the stock throttle, and it just really doesn't have very much voltage range compared to an upgraded one like, say, a Domino throttle. So that's probably an upgrade we're going to do in the future, is get a throttle with a lot more range, and I think our throttle is going to feel amazing. There's some little jumps here. We're going to start jumping.
that's gonna wrap it up. Thanks for watching, guys.
Huge shout out to Darwin EV. If you're interested in any of these products, go hit up their website, link in the description. We also have a discount code. We're just gonna keep riding, having a good time. We'll catch you later. See ya. Make sure and subscribe.
See ya.